Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lead a Horse to Water, the equine training and behaviour podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Dempsey. Now, in this very short episode, I want to talk through the answers to some questions that I was unable to get to in a recent webinar that I did for World Horse Welfare for their webinar Wednesdays, which are fabulous. They have finished now through the winter season, so from November through to March. So you can start to watch live ones again next November. They'll be back online for those. But if you want to go back and look at what they've been doing over the previous years, we have, I think, recorded what was the 68th. And so there are 68 for you to look back at. If you Google World Horse Welfare webinars, they're free for everyone. They're on YouTube. Go and take a look. But do take a look at that last one I recorded with the wonderful Justine Harrison. I love doing stuff with Justine. She's just such a great mind of information about behavior. So it's always awesome having her in on the Q&A. First of all, just to answer quickly what some of you might have thought was a bit of a departure for me, where I was talking a bit about negative reinforcement as well. And I've also always, I don't think this is anything new for any listeners to the podcast, I've always been pretty pragmatic about the fact that I would try to use positive reinforcement wherever I can. Not only do I feel that that's something that I want to do, I also feel that I should do because of my certifications and my accreditations with bodies like the IAABC and the ABTC that lead me to choose those sort of protocols. But it's just not as black and white as that. And also, I feel that if we're going to encourage people to try these new techniques, we have to almost dangle the carrot for them and say, look, come and try this because this is something amazing that is going to really help your training. And to begin with, they may not feel that they are able to give up their traditional ways that they've been using, but that we can give them some really helpful information that's going to make them want to look a little deeper. So that's why I'm always happy to do these more mainstream presentations. And I think it's really useful for everyone that we don't get a bit sort of sniffy about things and seem that we are doing things the right way. There's enough arguments on the internet between, especially in the dog world, between those that use what we all call balance methods, which I prefer not to. That's not my way of doing it. I don't use corrections if I can avoid it. They happen naturally for anyone that's jumping up and down saying, yeah, but I understand that totally. I'm with you on that. But yeah, I'm trying to encourage the world to talk rather than to put up those boundaries between each other and the barriers for learning that we see so often. So that's why I reach out and do things like that. So do take a look if you haven't seen it. But unfortunately, I'm just going to bring them up now. Unfortunately, we didn't get to all the Q&As, and there were some great questions, I have to say. So while I just open those up and have a look at what we had, I'll start to answer those questions. Somebody asked I love this question. How does the personality of the human influence their choice of training methods? And I think it goes deeper than personality. I think just like with horses, when we're looking at behavior, we are looking at who the horse is. So who is a human being in this case? We look at their past history. So how was that horse raised? How was that human raised? And the current conflicts that they might have in their life that are barriers to them learning certain ways. So yeah, I think that the personality or the history, the whole thing is very much a part of how humans choose to train. I'm not very good at being made to look small, being told off. I work much better if people encourage me and show me the way to go rather than being ostracized for getting it wrong, if that makes sense. That doesn't mean I'm always perfect and that I've always treated people the same way I would like to be, because I'm human. I try to always treat people in a way that makes them feel comfortable in the learning environment. So yeah, great question. And in line with the webinar, I'll answer it in a punchy way, not get too deeply into some of these, but I may return to some of these questions in greater detail at some point in the future. Somebody else asked, can you use the opportunity to relax as a reward in clicker training? Well, I'm going to say what we have to remember when we're using the science of learning theory is we must remember that it's only reinforcing if we see more of the behavior. So if we give the horse an opportunity to relax, so if the horse is feeling that that's a nice thing to do, it's a sunny day and the sun's on their back, and we ask them to repeat a behavior and then we stop and let them relax after it. And if we see the horse responding, being really more behavior, then perhaps it is reinforcing. That's one side of the equation. I'm going to talk now from a practical experience and say that I don't feel it is necessarily reinforcing. And sometimes what we see is that people will use that old, well, it's a reward that I took the cue off. The release of pressure is a reward or a reinforcer in itself. Yes, it is, but it's not necessarily the reinforcer that we're looking for. It's not a positive reinforcement. So it isn't a reward in that sense. So I personally don't see the opportunity to relax you. It's hard to use. How do you use it? You click and stop doing anything, or you say, okay, all done, and you stop doing anything. You'd be stopped and doing things, nothing, doing a nothing for a long time, part of your training session. So if I'm reading that right, I don't think you can use it. I think it's a good thing. We should always be making the training environment feel really relaxed for the horse. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. But do I think we can use it as a reinforcer? Not necessarily, no. The next one was when clicker training and the behavior has been learned and established to folk keep clicking and rewarding, or not acknowledge it at all. I've seen various opinions. Yeah, and this is an excellent question. One comes up a lot, but I love answering this one. The first one, do you keep clicking? No. So once the behavior is learned, it's paired with that cue. The cue to walk on is paired with the walking on. The stop is paired with the cue to stop, etc. So I don't keep clicking it forever. What I will do is nip back in regularly, maybe weekly, fortnightly, monthly, depending on how much I'm training with that horse or dog or cat or whatever. And I will refresh the cues, just do a round of clicking for that really nice, smart, clean response that I want. So I think that's what's most important, is thinking that behavior isn't fixed. If you don't keep being clean and tidy with it and going back in and reminding them of that, things get sloppy. In all training, things can get sloppy. So I would go back in. I never do that. What you're referring to there is dry clicks. So a click without food following, a reinforcer following is a dry, often termed a dry click. I never use them. There are people that do, and they build them into more complex systems. That's fine if you want complex, but it does need to be done carefully, but not for me. I never offer dry clicks. If you want to have a look at more about that, Google Susan Friedman, Blazing Clickers, and she has a great article that's free online to read about blazing clickers, which is fundamentally clicks without food following. So I hope that answered that. I technically don't acknowledge it. The cue is functioning well, but if I feel it's tailing off and we're not getting such beautiful behaviors, I will have a very discreet session on just that cue and the response and tidy it up as much as I can, just like you would with any method of training. And I think it's worth mentioning as well, I think I did in the webinar, that we're building chains and sequences. So there's often other things maintaining those behaviors as we go forward. That's complex and a bit more than I want to answer right now, but I do talk about that in the podcast from time to time. Next one was, can positive reinforcement cause extinction? Do we need to be mindful and start using it intermittently? How do we know when to use this? Okay, to do this, sorry, not use this. So yes, positive reinforcement can cause extinction, but not if you're doing it right. So I think I mentioned this a tiny bit in the webinar, and extinction happens when a behavior that we previously were reinforcing is no longer reinforced, and the horse is offering it and waiting for their reinforcement and thinking, hang on a minute, I didn't get that. So they try bigger, they push the boat out, they do a handstand. Is it this? Is it that? What is it? And they go into what is termed an extinction burst. So there's loads of behavior being offered and no reinforcing going on. If you just leave it like that, the horse is going to have a really stressful time. So it's absolutely possible to do it. It's like the rabbit being caught in the headlights, and you sort of stand there as a trainer thinking, I'm not sure what to do. The horse is doing all this, and it gets worse and worse. So you've always got to have plan at the back of your mind, a flow plan that suggests to you how long you'll wait when things have gone wrong to maybe throw food on the floor and reset and say, hang on, this wasn't going right. Or if you're riding, just to get off, give it a breather, let the horse eat some hay and get back on with a better plan in your mind. So yes, definitely extinction can happen, and we do need to be mindful, especially if we're going to use it intermittently. Now, intermittently. I'm always planning my intermittentness. So going on to what we call variable ratios and schedules, I am going to be looking very specifically at how I do that through chaining and through sequencing. So I try, when I'm moving off a constant click every behavior and feed it, to do it in a way that the horse can understand. So I'm always going to have my eye to it, but it's entirely possible using positive reinforcement to have extinction bursts. And yeah, it's not a nice place for the horse to be. For people who are training riding mostly with negative reinforcement, are there ways to start incorporating positive reinforcement into the training without starting over from the beginning? Yes, absolutely. And I would often refer to this as new cue, old cue. So if you already have cues where the horse is not upset or frustrated, and I must say if they are, then I would start afresh with everything. So if you have a horse that's had a pretty hard time with training previously, I would start afresh. But if your horse is really enjoying the work and you just want to add some positive reinforcement, yeah, you can work on adding some positive with your negative. So maybe pick some behaviors that you would like to work on and introduce click and reinforce for that. I've already mentioned those discrete sessions that I might have where I could have a situation of brushing up my walk transition. I want that really lovely bounce from halt into the walk where the horse is carrying themselves. I can play around with that with positive reinforcement. So even if all your other training is done using negative reinforcement to light your fire, get you on board with it, yes, absolutely. Take some very discrete behaviors and work on them with positive reinforcement. I don't think it's the devil's work. I think it will draw you in to want to do more things, more exciting things in future. Somebody says, what kind of reinforcer would you say the arena environment is? Okay, so it's not a reinforcer. The environment is not going to cause the horse to offer more or less behavior. So it's not a reinforcer or a punisher. But what you can find is that it has that classical association through a good old Pavlov, so classical conditioning where the arena is not a pleasant place for the horse to be. And I think I mentioned in one of my answers in the webinar that I like to think about slow training. So that's something I would do in the arena to change that horse's perception of the arena being an uncomfortable place to be, that they have this conditioned emotional response to it. A couple of things. Make sure that there's stuff in there that they can do, like eating hay, that they have a buddy on hand, and of course that they're pain-free, frustration-free before you start training. But slow training where there are little obstacles there, it might be a cardboard box filled with food and hay and different layers that they've got to work through. Build that up, make it easy to start, and then gradually make it harder. A bucket with water with some pieces of apple in it for apple bobbing. Again, start easy, not much water in the bottom, easy to get, and then start to raise the water. Things like that, just playing around with different surfaces, maybe a feed bag with some food sprinkled on it. So many things you can introduce into slow learning. Okay, and then the next question was, is your course for trainers available overseas? Absolutely it is. Now, what I can't do is say that I can organise your insurance as a trainer from my end, because I'm very aware of how the UK system works, but I'm not entirely sure about the rest of the world. So yes, absolutely, you can join it from wherever you want to in the world, as long as you are able to look after yourself and support yourself in terms of how you get your insurance to do training. So yeah, absolutely. And you don't have to train someone else if you don't want to literally pass out at the end of it and get the certification. You can just do the whole course and not end up getting to that point. So that's absolutely fine. I love the next question. How would you answer the question to other people who are a bit anti-positive reinforcement, who say they're only doing it for the food? I hope they're only doing it for the food. And honestly, it wipes their feet from under them normally. They say they're only of course they're only doing it for the food. So you would like them to do it because you're a bossy trainer, because you're forcing them to do it? Or would you rather they did it for the food? We all need a motivation to do things. So it's a great question. And other cleverer people than me probably have some great ways of engaging people in that question. But I always sort of frame it around the human equivalent. Would you go to work every day for nothing? For most jobs, that's not a thing. Maybe there are some brushing pony jobs that we would, but generally it's not a thing. So it's a great question. I'm asked it often, and I think that it'd be great if we could have a book of answers for that one. Could you please give advice on using positive reinforcement in athletic activities with horses? It seems to have some issues that don't exist in stationary behaviours like cooperative care. Yeah, okay, that's a good point. For example, I can't read the end of that question. Let me see if I can find. Yeah, I've even seen eating soft pieces of apple in between canter circles cause coughing, or the horse is starting to. Yeah, so I understand totally the question, and I think again it's a really interesting one. When you're doing athletic work, I think the thing is that you begin this stuff at walk, you begin this at halt, you add on some trot. And if you saw in the videos in the webinar, it doesn't take long before the horse is understanding, and then you can start to link those behaviours. So effectively, you could canter a circle, you could canter a figure 8 with a change in the middle, you could jump 4 fences and pull the horse up and stroke them and offer the food, whatever you want, however you want to do that. Or you could actually specifically mark that step. I've done this in canter transitions lots. Probably one of my favorite things to train is a halt or a walk to canter using clicker training. It's just, it lights their fire. So absolutely find your reinforcer. I would say something moist that is easily chewable rather than big pieces that they're likely to put their teeth into and then just swallow. So to get, when you get going again. But whenever we're clicker training, we always wait for the horse to be finished their mouthful. And if you train that right from the beginning, the horse shouldn't be rushing through trying to eat quickly and swallow stuff that's only half digested. I rarely train with apples or carrots. They're way too exciting for most horses. So I might use some dampened chaff with some grated carrot into it, which probably they're going to drop most off when you feed it from the saddle, but they'll have a little bit and that's enough and shouldn't cause them any problems when you're doing faster work. But yeah, it's a great question, and one that we could go into a lot more. Then the last but one question, I rub the horse that I ride, I rub his mane and I lean forwards and kiss him on the mane. Is that okay to use as a form of positive reinforcement? If you link it to a marker, so if you say yes when you got something right and then you stroke him, I don't think horses care whether we kiss them, but that's fine. If you enjoy it and he's enjoying the tactile nature of that, that's absolutely fine. But we do need something that we can cleanly add by the marker. So if it's a click, we click and we stroke him and scratch him and rub him around the mane. The kiss can be yours at the end if you really insist on it. But I think, rubbing his mane, if he enjoys it, if you get more behavior, then you are reinforcing it. It's a really easy equation. Rub, get more behavior. Rub, don't get more behavior. It's not working as a reinforcer. So it's a clearly cut one, but it's a lovely thing to do, to rub your horse on their mane. Last question now. So we had quite a lot in the webinar, but there's been quite a lot that I didn't get to. How do you decide what food to use as reinforcement in training? I find some food that is great to offer as a reinforcer in terms of consistency is possibly a bit high in value for my own mare. I see subtle changes when it's present, such as wrinkles above the eye. I've tried offering the same food regularly in enrichment to remove the novelty. Yeah, it's quite hard, isn't it? Because we want the horse, and this question goes on a bit, so I won't go too. But yeah, this person can tell that the food itself is creating some anxiety around training. And so I would say when you are looking to choose the food for your horse, you can do a preference test. So 3 or 4 buckets lined up and put your different reinforcers in. You might choose to put carrot, apple, hay cobs and muesli mix or something like that in, and you see which one over 3 or 4 trials your horse goes to first. Which do they eat first, and is it always the same? And different times of the year will be different. If there's a lot of moisture in the grass, they'll be happier with a dry reinforcer. If it's pretty dry, they're going to be looking maybe for a more moist reinforcer. It's just something different. What I tend to do is use the low value. So if chaff comes out or muesli comes out as the lowest one and carrot or apple the highest, I grate some of the carrot or apple to go in with the muesli. So it's not so super exciting. One thing as well that we have to, I feel, not everybody agrees with this, but I feel we should do is keep our reinforcer the same. So once we select one for that day for training, that is what they get throughout that session. I'm not a giver of jackpots which are different unless it's right at the very end and you finish on that, because then the horse is going to be confused because you use apple and you went to muesli, which they were less keen on, and then you go back to apple, back and forth, and they're like, hang on a minute, I really like the apple, I don't know why I'm getting this rubbish stuff in between. And we go into reward prediction error territory with that. So again, I think I'm going to come back to some of these questions and answer them even more in full as I go through the podcast in the next few months. So watch out for those topics if I do. But thank you so much to all of you who asked the most amazing questions. It was brilliant. And do look up the webinar. I'll put a link in the show notes, but do check it out if you want to look for the carrot or the stick, the World Horse Welfare Wednesday webinar. If you Google that, you'll find it. Have a great time. And in the next few weeks, I've got a new Q&A coming out with Katrina, who was on the last episode. So we're going to dig into some questions that we've received previously to these from the webinar and off the back of the podcast that I did with her. Take care, train kindly, have fun, and I'll see you soon.